have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was me and Rank. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
The Fantasy Points Media Group is proud to present the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, and we are about to go behind the grind with Christopher Harris of Harris Football. You may know him from a little bit of a novelist background there. Get you a little bit of Amazon, type in Christopher Harris. You never know what you're going to find on Amazon that way. Head over. His work is known on ESPN as well. You name it. He's been around the block a time or two. Christopher, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. It made it sound like I write dirty books.
That's what I took as.
Fiction, nonfiction. Usually, it's all up for interpretation right now, right?
It's fiction. Spoiler alert.
We're going to touch on that here a little bit later about some fictional writing. But first, we got to go. When we go behind the grind, we need to know what that intro music is going to be to introduce Christopher Harris coming to the wrestling ring, coming in the ninth inning to close out a ball game. Heck, maybe you're coming to the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio here later on this year, and you want to make sure everyone notices you walking in. What is that song going to be playing on the loudspeaker?
I don't know, man. I guess the theme song to the show, which is Under the Gun by Apex Manor, which is a really good song. So my podcast, that's the theme song.
Nice.
See, and I was totally prepared for a little bit of a jock jam kind of intro here. Maybe like a little final countdown or whoop, there it is. Something like that. Something you'd catch on jock jams. I don't know why I figured it's just jock jam kind of guy here.
Yeah, you got the wrong guy.
Yeah, put some respect on his name. Come on, Matt. What are you doing?
Yeah, well, I got to know. So we know it's not going to be jock jams that you're secretly listening to in the back room somewhere. But what is that one guilty pleasure song that you've got there that you're like, if people kind of knew I listened to this, they may look at me a little bit differently. I mean, we all have it. Major listens to Taylor Swift when he gets an opportunity to do so.
Never.
What's that one song that's a guilty pleasure?
He doesn't like music. We just got to.
I like music a lot. I just am usually not guilty of what I listen to.
Listen to good music. That's what it is.
Yeah. What do I don't really have a lot of crap. I'm on the old
little NSYNC, little Backstreet Boys, little Britney Spears, little
too old. It's not my time. Like guilty stuff from like the early 90s would be I don't listen to any of that crap.
Hey,
how about Phil Collins?
No, Phil Collins is
Phil Collins is legendary. That's like my man right there. Phil is my guy.
All right. Well, then I blew it. That's what I got.
Well, that question.
Hey, you know what? Beggars can't be choosers, and we will take that.
Okay,
right here, right now.
Yeah. So did you play any sports growing up?
I did.
If you did, how did it develop you as a youth as well?
I did. I played like everything as a little kid. And then into like high school, I tried like all the teams, like freshman year of high school. I tried all the teams. So I was on the basketball team, I was on the football team. I was on the tennis team, and that's probably it. And then at some point in high school, my parents said, you have to decide because you have to work one half of the year, which was good. It was taught me how to have a job. I'm glad I did it, but I had to like pick a season. So I stuck with tennis all the way through high school. And then, to be honest, the football guys were not my guys. So it was probably okay that I wasn't on the football team. Yeah. And I kept playing basketball. And I would often play pickup with the varsity, but I had to work during that season.
Nice. How did that develop? How did having a job in high school kind of develop you into the person you are today?
I think the sooner the jobs that I had in high school, I worked at a bookstore. The very first job I ever had, I worked at a bookstore. I worked at like a phone answering service. I probably did one other thing, maybe I can't remember, but yeah, I worked at a book publisher also. I think it was after school stuff, right? It was a couple hours, a few nights a week. I think it socialized me in a way that you don't get socialized like to other adults who don't have to be nice to you because you're around your parents,
Mhm.
who are going to
Exactly.
tell you what to do and ask you to do it. It made me understand responsibility probably a little bit more. It gave, whatever pocket change or pocket money, whatever I made, I got to spend. And otherwise I didn't really, get an allowance. So just some level of growing up that obviously doesn't end just because you leave high school, but it was maybe the beginning of it.
Yeah, and as a youth, what were some of the teams you enjoy, any sport, and some of the teams, some of the players that you looked up to?
So I'm from Boston area. I grew up in the suburbs of Boston. So all the teams are the New England teams, the Bruins. The Bruins probably first among them, I would say, hockey. That was the thing I remember liking from the youngest age, from like 3 years old, having recordings of me on like a cassette recorder doing fictional play-by-play because I learned the players' names. So I would say like this guy over that guy. Of course, I don't remember them now, but little kid. My broadcast career started early, I guess. And then for sure, Red Sox. I'm not really much of a baseball fan anymore, but this was before we all got ADD and I could sit through a baseball game. Now it's like 4 hours. I start scratching my arms and I can't do it. But certainly loved the poor tortured Red Sox, and the Patriots and the Celtics. That was kind of it.
Some people don't realize that the Patriots weren't always good. Some people don't realize the Red Sox were always good. There were some there's some lean years there in Boston once upon a time.
So they made, I'm older than you guys. So like I was young, but they made it to the Super Bowl against the Bears in the 80s, got crushed by those Ditka, the legendary team.
Yeah.
And they were, got terrible so fast. And then Parcells shows up and they get to another Super Bowl in the 90s and get crushed again by a really good Packer team. But yeah, in between there was like two spans of 10 years where they were god awful. They were so bad.
And even your Bruins there in the 80s weren't they were strong in the 70s, the 80s they kind of dwindled, and then about was it 91? It was the Oilers and the Bruins in the Stanley Cup final there. Really was rooting for Ray Bourque to kind of get that cup. I mean, that was the Messier-led Oilers there. I mean, that was going to be a tough one. I grew up a Habs fan here, so I totally know what you're going through. I mean, those old divisions there with the Nordiques, the Bruins, the Whalers, the Canadians. I mean, that was what hockey was hockey.
I had a girlfriend who lived in Montreal, for a while it was a long distance relationship. And I knew that it wasn't going to work out when she, to tease me, she bought a Canadiens jersey. And I was like, oh, it's never going to work.
Yeah, that'd be a deal breaker right there, I think.
Right.
So let's turn our attention here to fantasy sports here. I think I read somewhere that one of the toughest people to beat in fantasy in your leagues was Andy Barnes. I think there's a 16-team league there somewhere along the way. I don't know if this league is still going, but have you beaten him in that league yet? Have you taken that crown?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's been around since 1998. So, yeah. I mean, I've won it 3 or 4 times, but Andy's won it like 5 or 6 times. It's not an industry. Like I've known Andy since before both of us were in this industry. We knew each other when we were whippersnappers. And so like there are now like Jim McCormick is in it, but I think everybody else is not an industry person unless I'm forgetting someone. I apologize, but it's friends of mine from over the years. And it's been 25 years. We've had this league. But Andy's a crusher in that league. We're also in La Liga Lebowski, which is our dynasty league, which I bet some of the people who are watching your show or listening to your show are aware of La Liga Lebowski because there are hundreds and hundreds of clone leagues. It is 12-team league. It is intense. 26-man rosters. It's got like franchise tags and transition tags and player holdouts, and it's got a lot of stuff. Taxi squad. It's the most complicated league that any of us are in, and I've got 3 crowns in that one in whatever it's been 10, 11 years or something. And Andy might not have any. I don't think he does. Maybe 1. I think he has 1.
How do you even run a league like that? I mean, I've been in leagues where it's like a offense, defense, salary cap, everything. Like you said, the transition tags, that all comes into play as well. But you run a website, you write some novels there in the background, some books and stuff. How do you find time for a league like that?
It is, we've got it down to a science now, and frankly, from year to year, I don't remember all the rules, like player holdouts. Like, how do I tell whether someone's holding out? But there's a formula on the website, so I relearn the rules by reading them every year and go, oh yeah. So there are really only a few like real crushing work times in that league, and otherwise we all understand it runs itself. Like, there are salary cap hits. If you waive a guy, you don't lose his salary, you actually take a hit for next year depending on the duration of his contract. Like, it's real. It's a lot, but it's really fun. And like I said, I mean, there are hundreds of people who've basically gone to that page. I'll send you the link if you want to put it in the show notes or something, because it's a dynasty show. People might be interested in taking a look. And yeah, they call them the clone leagues, and there's a whole lot of them.
That's cool. Let's talk about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life.
Decision that changed the trajectory of my life. I would say quitting my job to like become a writer around 28, 20, like
How hard of a decision was that? Like, did you have like a wife or anything involved in that decision making, or
it's just me? I'm not a married guy, and I wasn't at the time. But I always wanted to be a writer. I actually I got an MBA at the University of Texas, and did MBA things for 3, 4, or 5 years. And in the back of my mind, and in my spare time, still wanted to write fiction. And at some point decided that I would quit. I mentioned to you guys before we started recording, I have a place in Amherst. I would move out to Amherst, Mass, and I would just write. And within a year, I wound up getting into the MFA program in creative writing at UMass. Nice. And that like completely changed the trajectory professionally, for sure.
Well, I think I read there somewhere that desire to write, especially the fictional realm, there started about at 13 years old. I mean, I think you said you're pretty young when you thought that maybe writing is what you wanted to do. Then you took that writing ability and through college and everything, and there was a little contest through the Talented Mr. Roto days there that you kind of wrote for, that kind of got that foot in the door. And then I think it was 8 years at ESPN before you went solo. But I think there's a little bit in between. I think you went from ESPN or Yahoo, but then back over to ESPN kind of thing. I mean, what kind of got your mindset to go, you know what, I'm going to enter this writing contest? Like, whatever, I'm just going to throw my hat in and see what happens.
It was a very different world. Fantasy was not nearly as big a deal. Most people didn't know what it was, and they thought if you played it, you were a loser.
You're a nerd,
like,
yeah.
And I'd been playing it for a really long time. Like, at that point, the league, the 16-teamer that you mentioned, that had already existed for 10 years probably. And I had done some sports writing while I was in grad school the second time for an MFA. I had found a website that wanted me to do some handicapping writing. So I handicapped football and NASCAR of all things, just because they asked. And so I was in the mindset of let's do freelance stuff. Like I was making it with the money. It was terrible, but I was like, I had student loans, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to figure this out. Let's start doing some freelance writing. Didn't really have a plan because there wasn't a plan. That wasn't the way fantasy was viewed at the point. It wasn't a plan. So, all I really knew was I didn't want to get a real job when I left. I'd had real jobs. They weren't fun. So once I graduated, I was like, please, in some way, shape, or form, let me not get a real job. So I tried many things. I sent many query letters out. I wrote many spec things, and one of them was this contest, and I won the contest, and the reward was to write for the website for no money. I was like, all right, well, great reward. You're basically getting me as slave labor, but I'll do it.
Just do it.
Because I was still in school. I was still in MFA school, and I knew that at age 30, whatever, what the real life was like, and I could stay away from it as long as possible. And within a pretty short time, that then Yahoo asked, and then they would pay me, and then ESPN said, we will pay you and put you on TV. So it developed into a career, but it was very, very much not by design. And I don't say that with humility, because there was no industry. It wasn't a thing. Like, it's so much bigger now.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned before you've seen the fantasy explosion, I guess. You started when no one knew what it was. Talk about
Right.
some of the things or some of the biggest changes that you see then versus now.
There's just a lot more of everything. You know, they're like at the when I so now you guys are somewhat familiar with my work, so you know, like, I'm the film guy, right? I watch every game and I talk about what I saw, and I'm trying not to get blinded by stats, and I'm trying not to get blinded by narrative or news stories or whatever. I'm just trying to focus on the ability of the players. And I didn't start that way. I started out covering baseball more than anything, and covering fantasy baseball, covering baseball in general, really is numbers.
Right.
And so everybody kind of did numbers because they worked. Batting average on balls in play was a real thing that actually could find you value when it was very different from the batting average. And you built upon that with sabermetrics and all that stuff. And people tried to treat football the same way and still do. And I did too, because that's all I knew. And I realized my analysis sounded like everybody else's analysis, and it would be a large task to do it. But if I could actually lay my eyes on every game, then I would have a different voice. And I think, to get back to your question, what's changed is that I'm certainly not the only person doing that. And it's just, there's so much more of everything. There's so many voices. And I think, unfortunately, too many of them sound exactly the same and just latch on to players for kind of no real reason, and then use a number to back it up, or latch on to something a coach said or the way the depth chart looks without really having to kind of consider that might not be real. And so there's a lot of similarity in the industry, which always was the case. It's just that there just weren't as many voices. And whereas, it was 100 similar voices, now it's 100,000 or 10,000 similar voices. But there's a lot of other people doing a lot of other different things that I really admire, that people that are putting in a lot of hard work that weren't there back then.
So just take this one step further. What's the biggest difference you see in yourself from when you started to where we are now? You talk about your film, going to that film kind of thing. Has your approach on how you see film changed?
I imagine it probably has, but I probably can't remember, like, when you're in the middle of the process, I watch with a lot more discipline than I did when I first had the idea, right? When I was a few years in at ESPN and had the idea to say, all right, let's figure out a way to watch this stuff. And not in real time, not sit in a bar with an Octobox, but to actually, after the fact, on a Monday morning, wake up and watch every game all the way through. I probably was just doing it to see if it would make a difference. And as I've gone along, I think I've realized it definitely makes my opinions different from people who only look at numbers, or people who only pay attention to depth charts or whatever. And I think I've had, everybody has wins, everybody has losses. We make a call on everybody. You don't get everybody right. Nobody does. But I think the people who like my work would say that I'm pretty sharp more often than I'm not. Like, if you were going to level in one direction or another, I know not everybody feels that way about what I do, but I think on par, the size of the show maybe makes you believe that more people feel that way. Right. And so I wouldn't say like I've developed some intricate knowledge of the receiver who, on his 8th step is able to plant in a perfect way. That I can't look at it at that level, right? I'm watching the broadcast of each game every single week. There's only so many hours in the day, but I probably am sharper about having laid that many. It's like, if you do something 1,000 times, you start to just sort of instinctively understand things maybe that you didn't understand before. So I probably have improved just through sheer repetition.
All 22 has definitely helped too. I mean, when we're looking at film, all 22 has made things a little bit easier than maybe pulling up old YouTube cutouts or something, trying to watch the game the day after. I think technology and how games are broadcast has certainly helped as well.
Yeah, my routine on each week literally is to watch the broadcast, because the all 22 doesn't come out by the time I have to do a podcast, right? So the all 22 work that I do is always Thursday. I've already done all the film work. Now I want to focus in on what Devontae Adams looked like, because he didn't have a good game, and I can do that with all 22. But that actually doesn't come out fast enough to really suit I got to put a podcast out at noon on Monday, so I have to have watched a bunch of games.
See, I like football. I like watching football, but this sounds exhausting. This sounds like it would just absolutely drain you. I mean,
Right.
can you imagine having to watch the Houston Texans 16, 17 games a season? Now, when do you recharge and how do you recharge after a season?
I still do so during the season I do five podcasts a week, and we do a couple of YouTube shows a week, and I'm doing ranks like crazy and obviously watching all that film. Once the season ends, once we're into the NFL playoffs, I cut it way back. It's one podcast a week and one YouTube show a week. Once we get past the Super Bowl, I take breaks in and among the events, like take a couple week break before the free agency, but still only doing one per week on weeks that I'm doing them. And then from mid-May to the beginning of July, I don't do any podcasts. And so, what I'm doing is not thinking about football really at all. And we all just did a podcast about the rookies, and I, said nobody knows anything. And maybe I'm favoring myself a little bit because I'm just not watching a lot of college tape. I'm not watching a lot of college football anyway. I have guests like Matt Waldman and Paul Perticchese on my show and ask them to educate me along with the audience, because I just don't know. I don't want to pretend that I'm positive what Jameson Williams is, because I only have so much bandwidth. Like you say, if I were trying to also be an amazing college scout, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm unplugged. The off season is when I write fiction. It's when I play more golf. It's when I hang out more with friends. Those 5 months of the season are an absolute grind where I have like one night a week that's vaguely free, and then the rest of the time I try to work as less.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. During that recharging period, do you watch any YouTube? Let's get a little personal. Let's talk about your YouTube. Let's talk about your YouTube playlist right now. What's on your playlist?
I don't look at YouTube. I look at Twitch a lot more than I look at YouTube.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't look at YouTube very much. We have a channel that we put content out for, but I would say I spend way more time watching like either a lot of chess on Twitch, a lot of poker on Twitch. So like chess guys, I like Hikaru. He's I mean, if you know anything about chess, Hikaru's pretty good. For poker, Kevin Martin's channel is really great. Shout out to the Canadians out there. Spraggy is really funny. So I'd say those are the ones I would check in more frequently.
Nice. I don't even have a Twitch channel. I need to get one.
I don't have a channel of my own, but I have an account.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so I got a serious question here. Okay.
It's not going to be serious.
Now,
the way you asked it makes sense.
You get it.
No, come with me here, okay? Let's come with me here. All the electricity has gone out. Nobody knows why. And 5 months later, food is scarce and gas is scarcer. What do we do? What do we do, Christopher? What do we do?
According to my novel, it would not be pretty. It would be pretty bad. Yeah, that's the premise for my most recent novel called Tulsa. And it did very well. People like the apocalypse. people, I sold more. So I have five books. How many books do I have? I have 4 books that have been published. I'm working on a 5th right now.
And got some inside information. He said we got a 5th one coming.
We do. I mean, it's not anytime soon. I'm still writing it, but the 4th also was the 4th, and it sold more copies than the other ones combined. Because people really like the apocalypse. But yeah, it's bleak. In the course of that book, much bleakness is pursued, and people try to live, and it's tough.
So if gas starts to go out and we start running out of stuff, we should probably start just counting our prayers here while we can.
Plug into a Tesla.
I mean, so the dedication page of that novel, I thanked my family and a couple of people, and I also said thank you to the world for not turning into this yet. And then within 2 years we had COVID. So good call, redhead.
Right, nice. Like no more books for you, buddy.
When electricity starts going out and toilet paper starts disappearing from the supermarkets.
Yeah, exactly.
This is book number 5. No, where did the the thought of Tulsa come from? Like, where did you kind of come up with this going from? I know you like your fiction, you're that fiction writer, but you're basically turning off fantasy football, maybe going to Amherst there, recharging.
Yep.
Also, we're talking like zombie apocalypse, everything kind of going down here. I don't want to give away too much in the book here.
No zombies,
try to put people off.
Yeah.
But where did that kind of come from? Like, where do we? I know as humans, we love hearing bad news. We are conditioned to hear bad news. I mean, it's in our newspapers everywhere. But where did you come up with the Apocalypse Tulsa storyline?
So it was 2017, and I was here in Los Angeles. You mentioned I split my time between Los Angeles and Amherst, but that was the first winter I ever tried Los Angeles. So it was the winter that the Patriots beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl. I was here in Los Angeles for that, not in this place, but in a different one, and had made some friends because I had like a listener meetup. So I had some friends in LA, but I was still sussing out whether I liked it. And I had the idea in this apartment that was kind of run down, and there was a day when the electricity wasn't working. The apartment was fine, but it was just a little old, and the building lost power. And something I thought to myself, I liked the beginning of Walking Dead. I like some, scary stories like that. The initial thought was I never see, except Walking Dead did this, but like in fiction terms, like in a novel, I hadn't seen a novel that just like had boots on the ground and what was happening in the present tense, in the first person right now, and never had that jump scene where they go to the generals and explain, well, here's why the electricity is out. The Russians did an EMP or whatever. I thought it would be cool to write the story from like a character story about a guy who is really, really closed off in his life before the electricity ever goes off. And it almost takes the apocalypse for him to become more of a complete person and kind of acknowledge some things about himself that I won't spoil. And I wanted that like only forward momentum, only like never a big picture of like why the world is the way it is. You never find out. Spoiler there. You never find out.
Nice.
And you can get that on Amazon because that's where I found it.
Well, thank you.
Now, Major, back to you.
Oh, my bad. I was so caught into like what he was talking about because I was thinking about The Walking Dead and how they kind of tricked me because the first couple seasons I was like all in, and then it just kind of got off track a little bit. But I'm still watching like.
Are you really?
I'm watching like the spinoffs now. I'm like so in. I'm like, ugh, I hate it, but I hate myself. I have a buddy for just like.
I have a long time friend who's in the 16 team league that we mentioned when we talked about fantasy earlier, who writes on one of those shows, one of the spinoffs.
Oh, nice. Tell them if you need me to be a zombie, I'm all the way down. Let's talk about an interview that changed the way you kind of viewed someone. Like you went into an interview thinking like, oh, I heard this person's a jerk. And you end up like, oh, I like this guy, or vice versa.
So I actually used to have a podcast called The Juggernaut, and it wasn't about sports at all. It was just a one-on-one interview with a writer or a musician or somebody who made something creative that I liked the thing that they made and I wanted to talk to them. And we did it for about a year or so, and it was a lot of work and it didn't really catch fire. And so I just sort of ran out of people I wanted to talk to and kind of decided but it's still out there. So it's called The Juggernaut. So my answer is I don't think I ever thought anyone was going to be a jerk because I wouldn't ask them to be on. But I will say the last one we ever did you guys ever see the HBO series called The Leftovers?
Yeah, I love that show.
Yeah, a really good show, and it's based on a really good novel. Tom Perrott wrote the novel, and Damon Lindelof was the showrunner. He was one of the guys on Lost. And so he's been kind of a made guy since then. And it was pretty crazy that in the course of 1 year of making The Juggernaut, we grew to the point where Damon Lindelof and Tom Perrott would come on our podcast and like talk to me for an hour. They're really famous guys in their worlds, right? And they don't know who I am. And then the podcast isn't huge, but for whatever reason, they said yes. And so I had an hour-long conversation with these two guys that was just awesome. It was a great conversation. Their humanity came through. Their desire to make something great that people wouldn't just think was, like had jump scares or was, kind of surface level cool, but actually resonated with people. I think The Leftovers, the series, definitely does that. And it was just, it's not that I came into the interview thinking that they were, going to be stupid or dumb, or, you don't have people on your podcast who think really bad. But to your point, it was a great question because it opened up a totally different viewpoint on how they saw their art and the things that they made. And I really liked it.
Nice. And if you weren't like writing or doing the fantasy stuff, what would you be doing?
I think I would always be writing. I don't make a living at fiction writing. It's a nice little side hustle, but it doesn't, I wouldn't, if I could not do it financially, if you figured out my my dollars per hour, it's not a smart career path for me. It's not good. It's really unwise. So it's kind of pretty clear that I'm doing it out of some sort of lack of impulse control. Like I just do it because it's how I process the world. So I think if I weren't doing fantasy, I'd probably just do more writing. I think this is probably the last job I'm ever going to have, though. I don't think I'm fortunately not lucky enough to this podcast has been, I never could have ever imagined. I'm so incredibly appreciative.
That's so cool.
But it's set me really. So I don't need to do something else, but writing, I'll just be, some sad 80-year-old sitting there going, read my novel. It's so good.
I like your voice. Yeah.
I don't know if I can tell there with the headphones on right now, but whatever happened to those like writers mutton chops that you had going on?
I've had lots of different facial hair over the years, but nothing going on right now.
I respect a good facial hair game. Okay, I respect a good facial hair game.
Well, I couldn't grow that. My God, I am not nearly enough of a man. I'm half a man when it comes to that. My mustache, my mutton chops are okay. My mustache area and like right here's okay, but my mustache is. It's a bad game. I got no game. It's not good.
So we've learned about your mustache game here. We want to learn what you learned. What has fantasy football kind of taught you about yourself?
I mean, it's all about what's happened since ESPN. It's all about the last like seven years, because I don't know that I guess that at ESPN I could do TV and not vomit on myself. It was tough at first, but you get used to it. And all that's good. Skills that I developed that I probably already had. I don't know. You guys can tell I'm pretty wordy. Like I can talk a little bit.
Good word choices. You have good word choices.
Good vocabulary. Very good. But probably the thing since ESPN where it's been like, I left ESPN not knowing what I was going to do next. I didn't leave to do the show. I kind of just left. I didn't want to be there anymore. And so the fact that it went from not knowing how to make a podcast, how to record one, how to post one, how to get ads for one, nothing. I knew nothing to the point, getting from that point to the point where it's a lot of people's favorite show. And I get such nice emails and tweets, and we have so many dumb running jokes that have persisted throughout. This t-shirt doesn't mean anything to anybody except for somebody who listens to my show. It's got all these crazy characters of players that we turned into nicknames and just stupid stuff. Just the thing, I don't know if I've learned it about myself, but that there's a like collective desire to relate to each other over something as inherently stupid as fantasy football. It's just the stupidest thing in the world. It's so dumb, but it's fun, and it's a fun distraction. And more than anything, we've all known in our own individual leagues that it's the way we commune with each other, that it's the way we stay buddies, stay in touch and have fun weekends together. We've all known that. And I guess what I learned is like, it almost feels that way with the many, many, many thousands of people who listen to my show, that it can be really like, man, 2 years is a dark time to be stuck in our houses. And, without the thing I'm describing from the audience, I don't know if I'd have gotten through it.
Well, Major, I know words too. I just don't know them in the proper order which they're supposed to go out. Okay, but I know words. I know big words too. I have a talent in everything.
No, he's using SAT like level words, and you're still like 5th grade. But That's neither here or there. Let's keep going.
Hey, you know what? The newspapers are written for like fourth graders, so I'm above average. Thank you very much. We'll have to talk a little bit later about how to make money doing these podcasts because I haven't figured that part out. But I have a feeling it has everything to do with relationships somewhere along the way. And who are some of those people? Andy Barron's name, it's kind of come up. You knew him before fantasy kind of whole
I did.
went out the way it went. Who are some of the people that you kind of respect that kind of helped you along the way here to get to where you are?
I mean, all the guys at ESPN, clearly that's where without ESPN, nothing that came after would have been possible because I wouldn't have had, I started, it's not like I flipped the switch and had no followers and then people somehow found me, I had this big following solely because of ESPN. So everybody at ESPN is really at the absolute, Brandon Funston took a really early chance on me at Yahoo. He's still a very good friend of mine. He's great. He comes on my show. He works The Athletic now. He's awesome. And then, but that was, sort of the first foot in the door. And then ESPN, just all of them. And since then, since I'm out and doing my own thing, you can tell by who I have on the show, because everybody who I have on the show isn't necessarily like a super close friend that I'm having beers with all the time, because frankly, a lot of them are in a lot of different cities. But I very specifically don't have people. The first couple of years, I just was trying to get people to listen, so I would have anybody on as a guest. But since then, I really, if somebody's on my show as a guest, I respect their opinion. I won't do it. I'm not going to have somebody come on and go, I don't have time to watch any of the games, so I kind of just look at the box score and I tell you what I think, or I crunched all the numbers in my spreadsheet, clickety click click click, and I'm not saying that people who do that are inherently bad or anything, but I'm not going to have them on my show because it just doesn't. It's not.
They are. They're bad.
Yeah, so bad. I can't even work a spreadsheet, so you don't even have to worry about that for me.
Well, I guess what I'm going to turn a negative into a positive, which is anybody who's on my show the last 5 years, I respect their opinion and I learn from them and they're great.
Nice. And then kind of just give us one last piece of advice for those of us trying to make it in this fantasy football world.
Oof. It's so different
when you start with oof.
Well, it's so different from when I started. It's almost like a completely different world. There wasn't an industry to make it in.
Right.
It just happened while we were doing it. It just happened. And so I don't have a great answer other than to say, your voice has to be special. It has to be different to really make it to the point where you can make it your living. I guess there are people whose voices I don't think are that special who are making it, but I think you have a lot better chance to make it, to get found, to get a platform that's bigger, to find an audience, to all that stuff. If your voice has got something different to it, isn't the same old thing. I said it earlier, there's so much sameness in the way you hear people talk about fantasy. And I know when I go on a show, if somebody brings up a player, then I know they're going to say, oh, well, that was just in the news. So that's going to be the way they lean in. Like I don't know if people don't realize that they're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, but that's not the way. Generally speaking, that's not the way. That there has to be something else. And I think usually it's geared around hard work. In my case, it's being an idiot and watching 16 games a week, that's a lot of work,
right.
But not everybody does it. Right. And so you feel like if you find me and you like what I say, you feel like you're getting something that you can't find other places. And I'm not saying that it has to be film, but something that they can't find most other places. I don't know what it is, but I really think that's the thing we should be trying to find.
I like that whole be niche kind of thing when it comes out to find your voice in this industry, find your voice in the space. And that's not just in this fantasy football space. That's in real life too. Find something that kind of separates you from the rest of the pack, and then find that thing and do it better than anyone else. Cause then there's no one else that's going to be able to do what you do there. Now you kind of mentioned here your voice, find that voice. Well, you've got the Harris Football Podcast that's coming up here, I think this week. What can we expect to see on the show this week? A little bit of a prelude to that, a little tasty little tidbit.
So first of all, you won't see anything because I'm so old. I don't do a video component. I just do a podcast. It's the way it is. It's just a podcast. But
He says just a podcast.
wherever you find a podcast, you can find a podcast. But yeah, we're starting this week and next week, these two next podcasts. I am releasing my initial redraft ranks for 2022. I refrain from ranking all winter. People do it because they don't have anything else to write.
Exactly.
They need content. So they make ranks that are nobody's drafting by and then just some talking points and that's it. So I stay away from all that. The rookies get drafted, they get landing spots. We have a sense of the depth charts. That's when I do my initial ranks. And so this week it's running backs and tight ends. Next week it's wide receivers and quarterbacks. For anybody who knows my work, cousin Josh will be actually hosting these shows. He's a weekly character, my actual cousin in real life, who is quite a character. He will be back on the podcast after a few months absence, and we're gonna take some heat for some ranks because this year, oh my god, the ranks, oh my god, there's not a lot of consensus out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that tiering the wide receivers after you get like past number 6 or something as far as that goes. I mean, it's anyone's guess, especially you want to throw PPR there, half PPR. Let's just muddy the waters a little bit more while we're at it. So,
yeah, it doesn't feel like a year, even though people will say it is because they always do. It doesn't feel like a year for zero RB. That's for sure. I would love one of those 9 running backs if I could get them.
And would you put Breece Hall? Is he one of those 9 running backs?
No. Good Lord. Good Lord.
Just had to throw that out there because, again, like you said, there's that noise out there. I mean, people, I don't know if it's one they're trying to be niche or if they're trying to be a contrarian, but you're hearing that name as a possible top 10 running back heading into 2022. And
Good Lord.
I'm not quite there right now.
No, I believe those would be the same people who told us Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a number 8 overall pick or whatever his rookie year. Not buying it.
But what I am definitely buying into harrisfootball.com, right? That's where we can find all these rankings. Everything's going to go up there, the podcast, the YouTube channel. You go to that website right now and you can find just about everything you're looking for, courtesy of Christopher Harris there and all the good work that's been going on in there. And I know way back when you started this podcast and stuff, you was a one-man show for you. And I can respect that because there's a lot of work that goes into everything for any of those content creators out there on podcasts, on YouTube channels. A lot of behind the scenes work that nobody kind of understands that goes into it. So much appreciation for everything you've done there. Much appreciation for what you coming onto the show here today. So I appreciate that again. And a little bit of your story there. I mean, I think Major learned a little something. So that's saying a lot right there.
Sure did.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I apologize if I was long-winded, but it was fun, really fun to talk to you guys. You had great questions, and I hope people were interested.
You made it easy.
Hey, yeah, the more I get to hear you means the less I hear of Major, and that is a victory no matter how you want to splice it. With that being said, head to fantasypoints.com, enter promo code Vipers22, and get yourself 10% off that subscription, and we will see you next week. Take care now.
Because you